Simulan mong abutin ang iyong pangarap na magbibigay dangal sa iyong bukas. Ang suliranin, hindi laging nandyan, dapat mong harapin. Kami iyong kasama sa bawat akin, magkaakbay nating lulutasin. Dito sa FND TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. Ang mga aral ay ginintuang atin ng bawat guro na siyang gagabay sa iyong pagkamulat. Naway umukit ito sa iyong isipan, maging mapanuri, sundin ng wasto at nararapat. Kagandahang asal ang ipakita, ipadama ang pusong may malasakit. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. Sakali mang tayo'y subukin ng unos, ating haharapin ng walang takot. Sasamahan ka ni Fernan at Dino, ang bagong barkada mo. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, edukasyon mo'y sigurado na. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa FerNanDinoTeens TV, edukasyon mo'y sigurado na.
FerNanDinoTeens TV.
Kumusta kayo, Nan at Dino? Natapos nyo na ba ang ating gawain?
Mabuti naman, Fer. Ang tinutukoy mo ba ay ang ating proyekto sa English?
Oo nga pala, muntik ko nang makalimutan. May proyekto pala tayong kailangan tapusin.
Tama kayo dyan. Medyo nahihirapan lang akong tapusin ito. Dahil limitado lang ang aking kaalaman kung ano nga ba ang mga impluwensya ng culture, history, at environment sa literature.
Tamang-tama. Ang ating episode ngayong araw ay tungkol dyan, Fer.
Hay, salamat naman at hindi na tayo mahihirapan at matatapos na natin ang ating gawain.
Halina't panoorin natin kung ano nga ba ang mga impluwensya ng culture, history, at environment sa literature. Tara, let's G!
Literature is said to be the expression of life in words of truth and beauty. It is the written record of man's spirit, of his thoughts, emotions, aspirations. It is the history and the only history of the human soul. Literature produced by society is often reflective of the values of that society. Therefore, the literature we read influences our view of the history and cultural identity of the society. Good morning. Welcome to FerNanDinoTeens TV. I am Teacher Nika, and I am your teacher lecturer for today. How are you, FerNanDinoTeens? I hope everyone is doing great in the comfort of their homes. Today, let us talk about the influences of history, culture, environment, and other factors in literary selection. Do you know that stories, articles, selections, and likes result from the various influences like environment, culture, social and economic aspects of the author? Before we proceed to our lesson for today, let me read to you our learning targets. First, identify the various factors that may influence literary selections. Second, explain how a selection may be influenced by culture, history, environment, and other factors. And third, appreciate the various literary pieces influenced by culture, history, and environment. Do you remember these characters? I'm sure you do. Maybe you had met them when you were a kid, or you have just met them today. Do you know that these stories were influenced by different factors? That's what we are going to discuss today. Let us have a warm-up exercise. There are pictures that will be flashed on the screen. Try to observe their cultural symbols and recognize which countries do you think they represent. You may type your answer in the comment section. Are you ready? Let's start. What can you say about the first picture? What do you think is the ceremony being held? Picture 1 shows a giant dragon costume that is used in the Chinese dragon dance. It was then used in a ceremony for worshiping ancestors and praying for rain. It gradually developed into an entertainment activity. It is a famous symbol of China. What about in the second picture? Can you tell me what the tradition is? Picture 2 shows a young lady with elaborate makeup and a traditional costume from Nepal. The said lady is a Kumari or Kumari Devi or living goddess. This is a tradition of worshipping young prepubescent girls as manifestations of the divine female energy or Devi in Hindu and Buddhist religious traditions. Can you share your thoughts on the third picture? Picture 3 shows a mariachi band from Mexico. The usual mariachi group today consists of as many as 8 violins, 2 trumpets, and at least 1 guitar, including a high-pitched vihuela and an acoustic bass guitar called guitarron, and all players taking turns singing leads and doing backup vocals. What about in the fourth picture? Kindly share your idea. Picture 4 shows one of the oldest types of body modification in the world, and one that many women still follow in a few different parts of the world. That is neck elongation. Many countries have women do this for beauty purposes, such as Myanmar and Thailand. But in this picture specifically, it shows a woman from a tribe in Africa. Can you share your thoughts on our first activity? This activity teaches us that diversity in culture, tradition, and environment is real. There are many stories of life around the world that we know so little about. When we come back, let us try to answer the definition of terms and discuss and discover the influences of culture, history, environment, and other factors in literary selection. So don't change your channel. FerNanDinoTeens will return after a short break. Stay tuned!
Ang Schools Division Office City of San Fernando, Pampanga ay kaisa ng Department of Education sa pagsasagawa ng mga proyekto at programa na tumutugon sa mga pangangailangan ng mga mag-aaral. Inilunsad ang Division Call Center for Tutors and Guidance Counselors upang magbigay ng educational at psychological assistance sa mga mag-aaral, magulang at stakeholders ng division. Kaya, kung may nais kayong itanong tungkol sa pag-aaral, maaaring magpadala ng mensahe sa Division Call Center for Tutors and Guidance Counselors Facebook page o tumawag sa mga numero na makikita sa ibaba ng inyong screen tuwing Lunes hanggang Biyernes sa ganap na alas 8 ng umaga hanggang alas 6 ng gabi. Maaari rin kayong sumangguni sa ating guidance counselors na nagbibigay ng guidance and counseling services. Lahat ng inyong ibabahagi ay mananatiling confidential. Ang nasabing programa ay nagsisilbing daan upang malaman ang feedbacks ng stakeholders para matulungan ang ating divisyon na mapagbuti pa ang mga sumusunod na programa. Ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Tumawag na sa aming mga numero o bumisita na sa aming Facebook page at magpadala ng inyong mga katanungan.
FND TV.
We are back, FerNanDinoTeens. Before reading and analyzing literary texts and how they reflect one's history, culture, and environment, let us try to answer the definition of terms to shed light along with our discussion. The first sentence is, I was growing to love this town with its simple history, proud of its old homes and fieldstone fences, telling the world it was a place worth staying. What do you think is the meaning of history in the sentence? Letter A chronological record of significant events. Letter B, information from printed media. C, make inferences from what was said. What is your answer? That is correct. Letter A, history is a chronological record of significant events. The second sentence is, I have learned a lot about the culture of China from my teacher. What do you think is the meaning of culture in the sentence? Letter A, methods learned about recognizing one's roles. Letter B, the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution of organization. Letter C, words that suggest the sound of movements and actions. Your answer is? That is great. The answer is B. Culture is the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. Our third sentence is, fireworks have long been an American tradition on the 4th of July. What is the meaning of tradition in the sentence? Letter A, the circumstance, object, or condition by which one is surrounded. An aggregate of social and cultural tradition. Letter B, the environment can influence people's behavior, mood, and motivation to act. Or letter C, the handing down of information, beliefs, and customs by word of mouth or by example from one generation to another without written instruction. What is your answer? Very good. It's letter C. Tradition is the handing down of information, beliefs, and customs by word of mouth or by example from one generation to another without written instruction. The fourth sentence is, a comfortable working environment will increase productivity. What is the meaning of environment in the sentence? Letter A good position to accelerate reforms that will help create good jobs. Letter B, mix of social and cultural conditions that influence the life of an individual or community. Or letter C, process of observing other people's circumstances in life. What is your answer? Correct. B is the right answer. Environment means the mix of social and cultural conditions that influence the life of an individual or community. You are doing great. Again, what are the terms that we need to remember? First, history means a chronological record of significant events, which often include an explanation of their causes. Second, culture means the set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. Third, tradition means the handing down of information, beliefs, and customs by word of mouth or by example from one generation to another without written instruction. Fourth is the environment, which means the mix of social and cultural conditions that influence the life of an individual or community. A selection or a literary piece can be written for different reasons. The writer may want to amuse the reader, to make a serious point, to create a picture, or to share a feeling or impression. The literary pieces that we read are not just merely from the word of mouth or hearsay from the generation of writers. It is created by the people who are influenced by different aspects such as culture, history, environment, or economic status. In this session, we will discover how the author's experiences and present situations affect and influence their way of writing. So here are the various influences or factors in literary selection. First is the cultural influences. It may be demonstrated through human behavior by showing their characteristics on how the characters behave in their stories. For example, the book entitled Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami shows some cleanliness of Japanese as part of their culture in one of the characteristics of stormtrooper. Here's the excerpt. He did all the cleaning. He took care of sunning the mattresses. He threw out the trash. He'd give a sniff and suggest a bath for me if I'd been too busy to wash for a few days. He'd even point out when it was time for me to go to the barber's or trim my nose hair. Another demonstration of cultural influences may be demonstrated through vocabulary or language used by their words of choices that elaborates their place of origin. For example, this book entitled America is Not the Heart by Elaine Castillo shows some Tagalog and Ilocano words. Here's the excerpt. Resurfacing in flashbacks as hero tries to adjust in the disorienting lull of peacetime and a world in which there was still corny music, lechon kawali, heavy but passing rain, televised sports, yearly holidays, caring families, recruited love. Once she fought alongside comrades who prized the ability to put a knife in the chest of a mayor or landlord on a regional bus and walk away with no injuries, minimal witnesses. Now she ferries Ronnie from school, works the cash register at a strip mall turo-turo, steam table restaurant, and wanders through parties at strangers' houses, picking up one-night stands, mostly men and sometimes women. Even though she is living in the United States, her heart remains attached to her Filipino heritage. Another cultural influence may be demonstrated through human emotions, by the tone and sound of the characters' voices being used. And for the last in the cultural influences, we have material items. Through the use of artifacts that represent the author's culture. Let's take a look at the story How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife by Manuel E. Argilla. We can see the cultural influence in various instances in this story. The story started with a recollection of an afternoon adventure in the barrio with his brother and his fiancée. It's a story of a man introducing his city-born wife to his more provincial family. The main idea is Maria being tested with Leon's family, especially his father, if she will be able to live a simple life in a province away from the city. The author of the story is Manuel E. Argilla. Most of his stories depict life in Barrio Nagrebcan, Bawang La Union, where he was born. His bond with his birthplace, forged by his feelings, remains strong even after he moved from Manila. I hope you've learned something from the literary pieces that left an impact in our society. We'll learn more about the influences of history and environment when FerNanDinoTeens TV returns.
Maya po oras kaya kayo, Fernandinos. Ako pala ay Elwin Arl Serrano ng City Tourism Office ng Siyudad San Fernando. Ngayong bulan na ini, pagmasusyan tayo ang National Heritage Month na ating temang Victory and Humanity, Upholding Filipino Heritage and Identity. Kambena nini, metong karang aktibidades na ng siyudad, apin ng launching ng bayong Heritage Passport. Yung Heritage Passport, apin ng metong karing proyekto ng kaya katamong siyudad, yung pamanamuna ng Mayor Edwin D. Santiago. Anong nuka rin makalagelangan ding eganagan ng heritage sites, heritage structures, naakit tamo kin kay katamong heritage district. Makakayabe din keni, ding importansya da ding mapel na tradisyon, keni syudad, kalupa na ng pamangawang parol, ang poing pamangalesa. May awo siyang heritage passport, uling atin kang dapat gawan, anong nukaran puntalan mo lading at tsuking passport, at saka ka mag-selfie. Kay ba't kanta, palto making tourism office, at mamielang sticker ka rin ega na ganang apuntulan mong lugar. at timong mengari ang tutong passport. Balo mingeni, panahon na ini, tamo makain bisa lumal, uli na ning COVID-19 pandemic. Kaya naman kimbanwa nga ini, agkatan ko ding bikers tamo, edad 18 hanggang 50, imbis na lumaot kayo po, di na nyo lang dita ka oras di kaya katamong heritage structures, kaya ni syudad. Anya naman karing mumunang 50 bikers ang makayari kaya katamong heritage passport, midinan lang premium only San Fernando loot bag. Inggawan nyo mo ba kanta makapag-register, punta kayo mismo opisina na ng City Tourism, yung munisipyo, at saka kayo magdalang metong valid ID. Kabinan kaya kayong heritage passport, ating makasipit ang instruction nung nano pa ing dapat gawan. Anya naman karing hanggang kapadyakin, nanano ko pa, tara na!
FerNanDinoTeens TV.
Welcome back, FerNanDinoTeens. As mentioned a while back, cultural influences talk about the cultural background in which the author is being exposed to. So, this includes the following. The first one, human behavior. Second one, the vocabulary or language used. The third one is the human emotions or perspectives. And then the last one, it could also include material items. And now, let us go over to historical influences. It is a branch of knowledge that records and explains past events. It is connected with studying or representing things from the past. It is about what has happened in the life or development of a people, country, or institution. The influence of this can be found in the poem March of Death by Bienvenido and Santos. The author, Mr. Santos, is a scholar of the Philippine Commonwealth Government. When the war in the Pacific came to the Philippines, he feared he would never see his family again, leading to a transformation in his sense of national consciousness and identity. The crisis changed the nature of his writing into a less carefree style to one mixing laughter and pain. It has the influence of history as it expresses the suffering of many Filipino in Bataan Death March by the time of Japanese occupation. Also, it shows sympathy and motivation. Next, we have environment. The circumstance, object, or condition by which one is surrounded. An aggregate or social and cultural conditions that influence the life of an individual or community. The environment can facilitate or discourage interactions among people. It can influence people's behavior, mood, and motivation to act. The story New Yorker in Tondo by Marcelino Agana Jr. shows how the environment influenced the literary selection. Let's get to know more about the author. He was a playwright in 1958 who wrote one of the more popular Filipino comedies that have been produced many times through the years. The story was about a girl who grew in Tondo and went to New York for a year. She was able to adapt to the life of New York with a short span of time. New York was a free and liberated country, comprised of so many different eccentric neighborhoods. She changed even everything about her, the way she dressed, talked, and mingled with others. She even tried to change everything about her mother. Lastly, we have the influence of economics, giving good value or return in relation to the money, time, or effort expended. The story of Father Goes to Court by Carlos Bulosan. Let's talk about the author. Most of his youth was spent in the countryside as a farmer. It is during his youth that he and his family were economically impoverished by the rich and political elite, which would become one of the main themes of his writing. He left for America at the age of 17 in the hope of finding salvation from the economic depression of his home. In 1936, Bulosan suffered from tuberculosis and underwent 3 operations. The story depicts the typical Filipino family: simple, poor, and hard-working. In the story, the rich and poor family are having conflict with each other. The rich man in the story was very selfish and did not want to socialize with the poor people. He ended up being sick because he only cares about his wealth and money. Can you follow FerNanDinoTeens? Great! So those are the various influences or factors in literary selection. Again, what are they? Exactly! We have historical influences, cultural influences, environmental influences, and economical influences. You are doing great! This time, let us try to answer the following questions. Use a happy emoticon if the statement is true and a sad emoticon if it is false. You may type your answer in the comment box. Are you ready? I know you can do this. Number 1. Literature has nothing to do with history. Is it happy or sad? Correct. It is false. Therefore, a sad emoticon for number 1. Because literature and history are closely related in discovering the history of a race, feelings, aspirations, customs, and traditions. Next, number 2. Literature produced by society is often reflective of the values of that society. Is it happy or sad? Exactly. It is true. A happy face for number 2. Because literature is an imitation of human action. It often presents a picture of what people think, say, and do in the society. What about number 3? Our literary works were influenced by our culture, history, environment, or other factors. Is it happy or sad? Very good. It is true. A happy face for number 3. Let us have another activity. Read and analyze each item about some of the literary texts we have covered so far. Again, you may type the letter of your answer in the comment section. Let's begin. Number 1. Which of the following scenarios in the play Romeo and Juliet shows customary traditions? Letter A. Juliet and Romeo's love at first sight. Letter B. Juliet's father was arranging for her to marry Paris. Or letter C. The Capulet and Montague's long history of feud. Is your answer letter C? Correct. The Capulet and Montague's long history of feud. Number 2. Based on the poem of Edwin Markham, The Man with the Hoe, how does society treat the hard workers? Letter A. They have a big contribution in terms of quality. Letter B. They were treated with little significance to the growth of society. Or letter C. They are loved and treasured. What is your answer? Excellent. The answer is letter B. The hard workers treated with little significance to the growth of society. And for number 3, the story of Shirley Jackson, The Lottery, states that the tradition has changed over time, and people really don't remember much but do it anyway. What point is the author trying to get across with this aspect? Letter A, doing something just because its tradition is ridiculous. Letter B, it's not okay to change the tradition. Or letter C, things change and that's okay. What is your answer? Yes, the answer is letter B. It's not okay to change the tradition. Remember that literature can inform people. It can share history and it becomes the history of a certain place of the world. The documentation of an event or even a story made up can change a culture. With every setting comes a societal influence. The things around and occurring during the period of book writing impacts the story in the way people act, speak, and practice everyday events. You will discover more when FerNanDinoTeens TV returns.
FerNanDinoTeens TV.
You're still watching FerNanDinoTeens TV. Let's try to go over again the various influences in literary selection. We have cultural influences, historical influences, environmental influences, and economical influences. You could see this when you read literary pieces, and you can further understand the point of view of the author. How well do you understand the lesson? This time, you will identify the literary influences in the following excerpts. You may write your answers in the comment section. Are you ready? Let's start. Number 1. Now, these rich man's servants were always frying and cooking something good, and the aroma of the food was wafted down to us from the windows of the big house. What are the things that you could infer or understand? What is your answer? Exactly. This excerpt from My Father Goes to Court is influenced by culture. It is the culture of the family to have party. It is the culture of the family to be always having dinner together or things like that. Maybe in the life of the author, he has this kind of family culture, or he has experienced it in his own family or with the people around him. Number 2, Father's farm had been destroyed in 1918 by one of our sudden Philippine floods. So for several years afterward, we all lived in the town, though he preferred living in the country. What is your answer? Correct. This another excerpt from My Father Goes to Court is influenced by history. As you can see, it is an event that happened in the past. And what is this one? It's the farm being destroyed by floods. In this situation, maybe in the following event, they were able to experience some difficulties or they experienced financial problems because of this sudden event. Number 3, his house was so tall that his children could look in the windows of our house and watch us as we played or slept or ate when there was any food in the house to eat. What is your answer? Definitely. Another excerpt from My Father Goes to Court is influenced by economic. As you can see, the house was so tall and the children could look in the windows of our house. So what could you imagine? Normally, rich people do not like to mingle with those on the street. They would always guard themselves through the high or tall buildings in which they live. This situation can be seen in reality and could also be reflected in our literary piece. The author has observed a lot of things where the rich people do not like to mingle with the poor people in the street. Or maybe the author has seen instances where rich people do not like to go out and speak with the people on the street. Based on the story, we could see the differences between the rich and the poor. So, we are talking about how the money or wealth of others influence the way they act or talk with other people. Number 4, Anna and Roy live the horrors of militarization during the martial law years in the Philippines. Their political involvement has caused them the loss of their families who were brutally murdered by military. They themselves became part of the list of people who were captured and jailed, tortured, killed, or made to disappear during this dark period of our history. Like those who are allowed by sheer lack to return to tell their stories, Anna and Roy are able to come back to the world of the living, but with dead souls. While love finds its way to share their grief and commitment to pursue their patriotic aspirations, it, however, fails to transpose their lives from the grip of fear and anguish. Your answer is amazing. The excerpt from Desaparecidos, the untold story of martial law, is influenced by history. It shows the settings are during the regime of Ferdinand Marcos, specifically during martial law. Number 5, Dickinson grew up in a prosperous family in Massachusetts. She lived a quiet and reserved life. In fact, she was a recluse living in her father's house. She did not have a close relationship with her parents, who pushed a strong Christian doctrine on their daughter. Dickinson, however, withdrew from the world to live in a seclusion, never marrying and having few friends. Her life choices and ability to live within herself are reflected in her poetry through a strong sense of imagination. What is your answer? Great! The last excerpt from Domestic Labor in Dickinson Family Households Influenced by Environment. FerNanDinoTeens literature is a very effective way of understanding a culture of a particular time, of a particular class, and of a social group. The study of literature lends to be an understanding of our history, our society, and sometimes ourselves. With literature, we see the countries and people as they were. Anyway, these are the references used in this presentation. Before we end our discussion, let me share to you this quotation by F. Scott Fitzgerald. That is part of the beauty of all literature. You discover that your longings are universal longings, that you're not lonely and isolated from anyone. You belong. This explains one of the many wonderful things about literature. Literature is a powerful force in the world, but it is often hard to explain why so many people are captivated by it. Here, Fitzgerald puts it simply: literature brings people together through universal emotions. Once we realize that our emotions are universal, we realize that we are not lonely and isolated from anyone. Sometimes, we might be ashamed of our feelings or feel like no one else has ever felt the way we do before. But then, we pick up a book and realize that those feelings are not only normal, but a key part of being human. This realization fosters a sense of solidarity with the rest of society, a feeling of belonging. Again, I am Teacher Nika. I hope you've learned from today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to FerNanDinoTeens TV. Let us all be safe and healthy. Good day!
O ano, Fer? Kaya mo na bang tapusin ang proyekto mo sa English?
Oo, Nan. Nakatulong talaga ang episode na ito tungkol sa literature.
Sabi nga ni Ma'am, literature is the history and the only history of the human soul.
Ang galing ah! Bukod pa rito, natutuhan din natin na ang pag-aaral ng literature ay nakatutulong upang mas maunawaan natin ang kasaysayan, lipunan at ang mga tao na bahagi nito.
At dahil dyan, paborito ko na ang literature. Kaya naman,
Maraming salamat, Ma'am. Isa na namang makabuluhang talakayan ng ating natunghayan FerNanDinoTeens.
Samahan niyo ulit kami sa susunod na episode ng
Fernandino,
Teens
TV, na kung saan ang kabataang Fernandino ay angat sa angking talino.
Bagong umaga, yakapin mo ang bagong pag-asa. Simulan mong abutin ang iyong pangarap na magbibigay dangal sa iyong bukas. Ang suliranin, hindi laging nandyan, dapat mong harapin. Kami iyong kasama sa bawat takin, magkaakbay nating lulutasin. Dito sa FND Teens TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa FND Teens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. Ang mga aral ay gininto ang atin ng bawat guro na siyang gagabay sa iyong pagkamulat. Naway umukit ito sa iyong isipan, maging mapanuri